Welcome to Metal Gods TV with Mick The Beard.
I am here with Enid Williams, founder member of Girlschool, and we're just going to see what's happening with her these days. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right. I know things went a bit pear-shaped last year with Girlschool and everything, and I don't want to go too deep into that, but how have you been since then?
Well, it's such a strange time, isn't it? It's yeah, I'm fine, but I suppose it's hard to it's actually hard to answer a question without mentioning COVID, isn't it? From step one. It's yeah, last year was very strange for me, and this year I go straight into astrology. Astrologers knew that we were going to hit a period of massive change in the world, and some astrologers, a handful of astrologers, were very specific about it being a virus. But there's been a huge amount of change. Certain years, it's just been non-stop for the last decade or two. And so I moved from London to Hastings, which was a huge change. And so I've got a detached house with a 200-foot garden for rather than being where I grew up in London. And it was like moving to a different planet. Some things are incredible, the beautiful scenery, and there's some lovely people and so on. But I've missed London a great deal because it's in your DNA. It's, you know, it's a capital city. It has a particular culture that I grew up with, and that was home. Yeah. And this is another home now, but it's a very different sort of place. But I just knew that it was sensible to have a bit of an independent source of food and a wood burner so that I wouldn't starve or freeze to death, which on January the 1st might be coming in quite useful, I think.
Yeah.
So that's been, so last year was very strange. I was doing a lot of stuff around the house. I started to do a lot more astrology. But the immensity of what's going on, we haven't seen a grouping of planets like this for 500 years. And we're also at the end of this year entering a new era, really. Everything is cycles within cycles, and it's a 200-year cycle that is beginning. So the changes that we're going through are going to be much bigger than anything we can really comprehend. And of course, music is going to change. Exactly how, it's hard to tell, but obviously half the musicians haven't been able to support themselves this year. Half the venues are going under. So somehow we have to find new ways to adapt to that and keep the flame burning.
Definitely. I mean, I think once we come out of this, there's going to be, like you say, probably half the venues and all the bands trying to clamour to get gigs in these venues. And I think a lot of the smaller bands are going to fall by the wayside because of it, to be honest.
Mm.
And
yeah. But you could say it might be some of the bigger bands, perhaps, simply because if you have to distance to some extent, you could perhaps pay a tribute band easier than you could pay a larger originals band. That would be another way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Although I don't want to get into politics and offend anybody, however passionate I am about Europe, because I have family and boyfriend there and done so many great gigs around it. But the nature of touring is, in 78, 79, we were in a van doing tours of France, and you had carnies in those days. So you'd get to the port and you'd have to take out every single piece of equipment from the back of the van. Yeah. They'd open your suitcases, they'd open the back. So you're spending several hours there. Then you have to go off. Then you've got to pay for an extra hotel because you can't get there in time for the gig, leaving that morning. And so And then now we've got to have visas. The visas for America, you have to pay a lawyer. It's the states do everything they can to keep bands out and protect their own musicians, and you end up spending thousands with no guarantee that the visa is going to come through. And we're going to have that in Europe, and without bands being able to tour Europe, honestly, Britain, I love Britain. I'm very proud to be British, and the audiences are amazing, but the venues in general treat you really, overall, really badly compared to almost every country in Europe.
Yeah, I know they do, yeah.
Get a crate of beer, but you won't get your hot meal. And
Yeah.
it's, you know, when you're traveling, you want to stay like, yeah, you want to do the best gig possible, and you want, you know, a bit of food and sleep. Well, it's okay in your 20s, and if you want to do, you know, if you want other ways of staying awake, but otherwise you need a bit of food to keep going.
That's right. I mean, I know from working behind the scenes at certain festivals and what have you, especially when somebody like you has got a slightly different food requirement. That's even worse, isn't it?
Oh, you're so polite. Well, since you told me earlier about the festival, they are the worst.
Yeah.
The worst. And yeah, really, you're just...
I mean, you mentioned you're vegetarian, all the eyes start rolling or something, and you think, oh, God, here we go.
Well, I can remember... I really do love my food, and I used to run a vegetarian catering company, and I've actually done quite a bit of cooking online. I must start doing that again, because it's a big part of my passion. I grow some of my own food in the garden. I like to cook it, and yeah, that particular gig, I could probably, Kim would strangle me. This is one of the things that we just clash on, but it's not anything wrong. I'm just passionate about food. I'm obsessed about it, and some people eat to live and some live to eat, and yeah. I know which type I am. I'm counting the minutes before my next meal time.
Oh, really. I like it too much. I mean, the weight I've put on past few months is ridiculous. But you know, because we sat in the house all the time, and first thing you do is grab the food bag or something.
It's pretty tempting, isn't it? It's,
yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, I'm going to start fasting on January the 1st when there's no food coming in the country. That's my plan anyway. So
most of that, we've got our own chickens, and we grow a lot of stuff ourselves. So the chickens keep us well fed with the eggs, so we're all right.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, because I've been vegetarian for 45 years, but I eat mostly vegan. But I'm not. So I'm 100% vegetarian, but with the vegan, and eggs are particularly cruel because they kill the baby chicks. It doesn't have to happen that way.
No, it doesn't.
It's factory farming, and it's obscene. It's absolutely obscene. The worst is in the US, but just generally across the board, animals are treated very, very poorly. And when we can treat animals so cruelly, I think it's only one more step to treating humans cruelly.
Oh, definitely.
It's you know, when you put people in gas chambers, it's like a production line of murdering, but we have that production line of murdering with animals, and we don't bat an eyelid to it.
Oh, definitely.
But eggs don't have to be cruel if you just have the occasional one from a...
Yeah, I mean...
But too many foxes around here.
Yeah, well, we rescue expats about 2 or 3 times a year. So most of mine are expatriates. And,
oh, how lovely.
They just lay, I mean, like you say, they lay eggs anyway. You don't need a cockerel. It's just natural cycle. They lay an egg once a day. So there's no harm in taking it from them. You don't have to force them to do it. They just do it. That's why I don't understand battery farming and all that sort of stuff. It's just ridiculous.
Well, it's cost. Everything comes down to money. And so that is the way to get the most eggs out of the most chickens as cheaply as possible, with absolutely no consideration. There's also a huge problem with farming, with transporting animals.
Yeah.
And with the cruise ships, of course, are doing a lot less business because of COVID. So they're shipping a load more animals around to slaughter them in a different country, on a different continent, and they just cram them in. They used to do that on the slave ships.
Yeah.
It's just living beings, whether they're humans or animals, treating them like resources, like they're just something to sell. Horrendous, utterly horrendous.
It is frightening, but I don't think it's ever going to stop, but at least we could try and make it more humane, I suppose.
Well, there's another factor. It's I don't know. I mean, there's certain things I'm really, really, really passionate about, and whether people that follow you are interested in these things, but I talk about the things I'm passionate in the way that I sing about the things I'm passionate about. I'm very singular. I'm very in some ways I don't fit into any group of people. I'm always I'm very independently minded. But one thing I'm truly passionate about, there's so much going on at the moment. There's so much that is wrong, so much that needs to change. But every single subject that we might talk about is completely overshadowed by climate change. Because without a planet to live on, it doesn't matter whether we're black or we're trans or we're female or we're unemployed, or we're in a band, or we're Tory, or everything goes out the window when there's no planet. And we're still, it's a little bit like, oh, well, if we recycle, if we do our recycling religiously, everything else is going to be fine. It's not.
No.
We are at the edge of a precipice. And obviously, the biggest problem is with gas and oil, and particularly with the very right-wing governments. What Trump is doing is obscene, drawing out of the Paris climate agreements and so forth. We have to change manufacturing and how businesses run. That's one of the main things. But on a personal level, there are three factors that make a difference. One is overpopulation. When I was born, there were 3 billion people on this planet. There are now nearly 8 billion. Yeah. The trouble is with this subject is it's deeply, deeply personal. And it becomes a little bit like, don't tell me how many children I can have. And the word China comes up.
Yeah.
But it's not about making laws, saying autocratic laws that tell people what they can and can't do with things that are considered personal. It's more that we have to keep the world population and the national population down. We've already got double, treble the amount of people we can feed. And it brings up so many issues about our personal rights, but also the majority of large families are outside of Europe and the States of people of colour. So the average Nigerian might have 6 or 7 children. And then it becomes framed as a racist issue. And it isn't. No. It's about saying, what can we all do to stop this planet dying? And one of them is if we can limit the number of children. And many women have pressure on them from their partners. Many places in the world, women don't have access to contraception or even education. There are economic reasons, if you live off the land, for having large families to have labour and so forth. And actually, it's not remotely a racist issue if you look at it from, let's see, Tony Blair's got 4 or 5. Boris Johnson's got at least 6, but there might be a few more hanging around. David Cameron's got so many, and he sadly, of course, one child died, but he's got so many children, he leaves one at the pub. That's how important they are to him. Rees-Mogg, I think, has got 6. I could go on and on. So it's not just people of colour that have larger families for cultural reasons, for all sorts of reasons. It's about asking the question, what can we all do? So you might have 4 kids or whatever. I'm not going to hold that against you. You're nodding, going, yeah, I've got 4. Are you serious?
I have, yeah.
4?
4.
Bloody hell, that was completely random guess.
That's fine.
But I could tell the look on your face. You know, I'm not trying to make it personal. I wish you had less, and no offense and it's terrible because it's kind of like, you know, you don't want to say that about, you know, this lovely child who happens to be the youngest one or whatever. But it's a huge issue that we have to look at the bigger picture. Yeah. And we just simply, in this country alone, we do not grow enough food to feed ourselves. We import about 50% of our food, and fruit and veg in particular. Most of it comes from Europe. So but that's one of the issues. The second one is transport. Yeah. And that is cars and flying. But I have barely left the house for 8 months. And I live by myself. My boyfriend's in Europe. My family's mostly in Europe, bit in London. I haven't got a car. So I'm kind of like, I can go for a walk, but I can't really go anywhere without taking big risks that I don't particularly want to take if I don't have to. And the people I really love, I can't see anyway. And so that's hugely problematic. But this is going to affect music and bands. So I'm finally coming around to something that is a bit more sort of, I don't know if you were planning on asking any questions, but I've got what's called the moon in Gemini. Yeah. You've got your sun, your moon, ascendant, and yeah, I talk a lot.
It's fine. It's fine.
Especially when I get passionate, and I'm really passionate.
This is what I wanted. I want people to know the real you rather than just winning a band. You know what I mean? It's
okay. That you've got it. You've got it.
Yeah. Because a lot of your fans and Girlschool fans probably don't know a lot of this about you. You know what I mean? And
no.
They get all, like I say, you go to gigs, you go to festivals, you just get the generic questions. You've got to promote your albums, you've got to promote your music, but one after the other, it gets a bit boring, and you don't get a chance to ask about the real person. Yeah.
Well, it's very much, yeah, I will talk more about stuff, but I tend not to talk about personal stuff.
No.
Online very much. And that's a choice. I mean, for example, I'll go back to transport, but for example, I've been seeing somebody who's a lot younger.
Yeah.
And I think it's great. I'm very happy. Why not? We're 2 single adults having a nice time together.
Yeah.
But the way that people make judgments, if you know, if a guy is with a much younger woman, then good on you. But if it's the other way around, like Helena Bonham Carter got ripped to shreds as a cougar, you know, the usual stuff, and so on. But so, and also, yeah, my private life to some extent is private, and but I'm very open about most things. Yeah, so I'm telling you about that, but I don't put the pictures and stuff online because I kind of go, no, I'm not going to talk about that if you've got a problem with it, and I just know some people will have. So I go, nah, I don't.
No, that's it. But I mean, it's not getting that deep into your personal life and bothered about. It's just other stuff in general, like your vegetarianism, some of your passions, and this, that, and the other. They never get asked because it's just bang, bang, bang about the band, about the music, about this, about that, and that's it. You go away, and nobody ever knows about Enid, really.
Well, I've plenty to say about everything, but yeah, the transport thing. It's seriously, we can't fly as much as we have done, and that's the one area where I feel, you know, it's like what Girlschool always did was when I joined the band, Kim and Denise were virtually ready to give up throw in the towel. And Jackie and I worked really hard together for a few years before that went completely pear-shaped. A lot of it was to do with Kelly. There was always a rivalry there because, of course, I grew up with Kim, and it got I was very much increasingly sidelined. And Kelly was very talented and so on, but it got really kind of strange. I've lost my train of thought now. I'm back to the cars and planes a little bit. But yeah, they didn't want to do tours, and particularly, and we did, of course, we toured with Motorhead and Saxon and so on, but we did very few tours of our own, and they tended to be 2 or 3 weeks generally when we toured, and we'd only do one of those a year maybe. So it would be a case of flying out, doing a festival, and they're great. The thing about Girlschool, and I've been asked several times, why wasn't Girlschool a lot more successful? And I had very strong opinions about that, but I don't think it was a particularly great thing throwing me out in 1982. And then Kelly became so central. It was, same happened with Skank and Nancy, the same happened with the Bangles. Somebody becomes, have a solo career, then the whole band falls apart. And it was such a shame that because she did become so focal, but then chose to throw it all away. She was throwing away, you know, my parents remortgaged the house so that Girlschool could happen. My mum died, my mum's heart gave up. She died at 62. She never got over it. And that's something I will never forgive Kim or Kelly for, or Denise. I can't, that's one thing I will, you know, I've forgiven a lot, but I cannot forgive that one. And so to be so central and to partly through talent, but partly through pushing oneself into that situation, through people one gets close to and so forth, it meant that, you know, the band was throwing it all away at the height of success. Yeah. And that was a terrible shame. And also because of the internal rivalries within the band, so much energy was both in the first period that I was in the band, and then again later, with all the different members, all this kind of infighting and constantly vying for status and power, and really nasty Machiavellian stuff. All that energy, if we could have collectively put ourselves together and put that energy outwards, it would have been quite a different story altogether. So Girlschool's always been a band with a name that we would pull people in at festivals. It's like, because our name would be recognized, but we never quite got to the level where we were able to do the bigger tours, because the band kept undermining itself and continues to do so. Yeah, that's really that's pretty frank, wasn't it? But that's really, you know, that's very much and very sad in a way, very sad. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life honouring my parents, because they gave so much. And the first gig I ever went to was in 1962, and you might think, God, is she that old? But actually, my brother really is the reason that Girlschool started, because he used to play in a band called the Cherrywood Quintet, and they played at the local social club, which was in the street opposite to where we grew up. All right. And there's a photograph somewhere, I don't know where it is though, a photograph somewhere of me dancing in front of the stage at the age of 2. I was born in 1960, and obviously, and he's playing guitar, and he encouraged us years before we actually put a band together. And so that was really kind of the impetus. So it goes back so much to early childhood, and my family were quite musical, really. My dad and my uncle used to play lots of instruments, and at the moment my brother's playing more. My brother just turned 78, and he's in 2 ukulele groups. We have big arguments. I'm isolating. Yeah. He's going out twice a week, having ukulele practice with 2 other old pensioners. It's like, you're supposed to be fucking isolating. Oh no, got on the bus, got on the bike. Oh God.
He probably
It's like,
thinks he's earned it.
well, it's he's high risk.
Yeah, I know. Well, you can't tell some people, can you? You just want to live.
Well, yeah, but it's not quite the same music, but
Yeah.
but yeah, he was like, you know, a huge part of it. Anyway, with the I'm sure I was at transport at one point, and then transport, yeah, the flying, not, you know, the touring would get stressful, and Kim hated touring, just didn't want to do anything, and well, and Denise actually for that, but so we tended to do festivals, and to fly out to a gig and fly back and just do one gig, it's going to be harder to justify that now. The way I've looked at it is my carbon footprint is so low, it's probably lower than most people. That is the one area where I've used up way over my kind of where I've done too many flights in my life, and we have to reconsider. But how it's going to be harder and harder for bands to go out and tour, but we have responsibilities. Can we get electric vehicles on the road and tour with electric vehicles? Be very expensive. Then we're back to
initially, yeah, but I think once everybody gets on board, more people get on board, like everything, it'll come down in price, hopefully.
Of course, but what are bands going to do for the next 5 years till it comes down? Create more climate change, or not be able to afford to do it the most ecological way, and so forth. So there's many questions we have to ask, many behaviours we have to change, and I'm not putting forward any right or wrong. But the third one is food, and that is a massive factor towards climate change. And I think what the figures are, beef is about the worst. So I think it takes about, I don't know, 20 or 30 times as much destruction happens to the planet if you eat beef to if you eat plant foods, for example. So beef is one of the worst. Sheep aren't so bad, so you're better off with lamb, because they tend to be on top of the mountains, and where you can't grow food, generally speaking. So they're not quite as destructive. Chickens are better again. And then dairy is, again, you have to tie that in with how animals are kept and so on. But you can feed many more people on this planet. If we all became vegan, it would revolutionize everything. If we all became vegetarian, it would half revolutionize everything. So if everybody could eat more plant foods, some people feel a need to eat meat, but a couple of my friends eat organic meat twice a week, and then eat vegetarian the rest of the time. Cut down on dairy, just cut down on anything, and every little action that we take will accumulate. So those are the three big ones: population, the number of children that we have, how we travel, car, plane, so forth, and what we eat. Those are our personal contributions to climate change, and we have to live well our own conscience where we're going to make compromises, but we have to change our behavior. And recycling is just touching the surface. It makes us feel good, but it does sod all.
Yeah.
And the truth is that the pandemic, which is destroying the music business, obviously it happened because of the eating animals, pangolin and so forth. And the reason that people are eating animals like that is partly there's cultural stuff and Chinese medicine and so forth. People are moving further and further into animal territory, further and further into forests, cutting them down, increasing climate change, but moving to animal habitats where humans haven't been before, and therefore picking up viruses that we're not immune to. And people are doing that because with more and more people, we need more and more food. So if everybody was vegan, there would be no COVID, and there would be no the music industry completely collapsing, i.e. half the bands that we want to go and see just aren't going to exist anymore. And that would not happen if we didn't eat meat. So everything is interrelated, and we just have to learn how to make changes and do our best.
Yeah. And
anyway,
it's all right.
You can ask a question now.
Yeah, it's fine.
I tell you what, I don't drink coffee normally, but I was so tired this morning, and I thought, oh God, it's like, you know, I turned 60 this year, and I'm going to look 80. I haven't had much sleep tonight, so I had about 3 cups of coffee, and because I don't drink it very often, it's a bit like having, like, you know, a gram of speed or something.
Yeah, if you're not used to it, probably is. Yeah.
So I'm back to the organic tea in a minute.
Yeah. So what's on the horizon for you musically yourself? I mean, I know at the moment everything's on hold, but obviously you're not in Girlschool anymore, and there's probably some stuff you can't tell me, I know. But what is on the horizon for you musically?
Well, that's really, it's something I'll talk about when I'm going to do it. I'll put it there. It's I will definitely be continuing to play music, because it's not something that you do, it's something that you are. It's just, I walk around the house all the time singing at the top of my voice, because I just burst into song. A lot of the time I don't put music on, I've got birdsong, and which is quite different. But I walk around singing all the time. And yeah, I will be doing some music in future, because I can't not do music.
Yeah.
It's, I suppose there's been a lot of stuff to organise in my life in general over the last couple of years. And of course, COVID's changing everything. Everything is up in the air. So it's almost impossible to make plans. You just have to keep sort of shifting around. And it's you know, it's like when you sort of ask me how I was, the benchmark when somebody says, how are you? It's like, well, I'm not dead and I'm not ill. That's the first one. The second benchmark is the people close to me. No one's died who's super close to me, and no one's ill yet, and hopefully beyond yet. So nothing else really kind of comes into it. It sort of changes priorities in a way, and it certainly changes timing. So I've been, I'm growing a lot of food, well, not this month, but I have grown some food and doing more cooking. But that's kind of what I do to a certain extent. It's very time consuming when you've got a big garden. It's not like gardening in London. I've got a hard hat on with an axe. You know, it's more like forestry or something. You know, I'm not doing a bit of weeding and planting some flowers. It's, you know, it's proper stuff out there. I love it. I love being in the open air. I love nature.
Is this the sort of stuff you would have done, like, you know, when you came back off tour, you'd be doing this in between tours and what have you? This is the sort of stuff you would do to relax then, is it? The gardening and the cooking and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it's sort of yeah, it's a way of life in a sense. I've always cooked for myself, and when my mother used to make sort of quite traditional food with meat and so on, and then when I became vegetarian, I lived on chocolate and cheese and bread and complete shit. And then sort of in my late teens, I mean, there was a huge amount with my weight. I got terrible bullying with my weight in the band. That was a big thing. So guess what? I became anorexic. What a surprise. So I lost a lot of weight, and then I put it back on again. And it was a huge it was, yeah, it's quite traumatic even talking about it now. But that was a huge thing. But in my late teens, I learned about nutrition, and I can still picture Kelly. Actually, she picked up. I've got really strong memories. In 1979, or no, 78, she picked up a virtually raw steak, and she's like, you know, waving it in front of my face in a restaurant in France, and because it's, you know, it's a piece of dead flesh to a vegetarian.
Yeah.
And she got heavily into animal rights after she'd lived in California for a while and completely changed her priorities and so forth. But it's just, my parents used to garden a little bit. My dad grew a few veg. And when I learned a bit about food in my late teens, I got heavily into yoga at that time. I was doing it 3 times a week when we weren't touring. And I got heavily into cooking. And it was very much nut roast and lentil soup and that kind of, that was all 70s stuff. That's why, who's that woman? The woman who was talking about kidney bean burgers, the single mother, Jack Monroe. She comes along about, you know, cooking when you've got no money.
Yeah.
As though she's invented the kidney bean burger. And I go, burger. And I go, but we used to make those in the 70s. And
Yeah.
I sure as hell didn't invent that. There's lots of people were eating kidney bean burgers back in the 60s. And I'm sure they existed way before that. You're not the first person that has thought, well, what's the cheapest tasty meal I can make? Tin of tomatoes, tin of kidney beans, few onions, bit of grated carrot. You can make some pretty good, you just need herbs and spices and a bit of imagination to make some great meals. So it's always been a big part of my life. But there's when I didn't get into social media for a long time because of this horrendous kind of stuff going on online with certain members of the band, and so I just stayed away from certain things. But it's always a bit of a challenge because I've got a lot of pictures of my garden, and I have got a lot of pictures of dinners and various pictures of gardens, and it's like, do people really want to see this?
Well, they do. You stick them on Instagram, people lap it up on there. Oh yeah.
Well, somebody. Well, I haven't really been doing much there, but although, you know, there's many options available. But I did. One guy didn't want to see pictures of my courgettes.
No, but
So, but I've tried to keep pages a little bit separate.
yeah.
So instead of having everybody on one page, it's kind of like, well, go over here for the astrology, go over here if you want Girlschool stuff or music in general, because I've got loads of photos I've not posted up ever, and all, demos and all sorts of things. And then, you know, if you want to know about anything else about me, you might not, but if you do, this is what I love.
That's right.
So
and over the years,
yeah.
you've had plenty of sort of like collaborations with people, you know, Dio, Lemmy, that sort of stuff. Is there anybody that stands out that you thought that was the best collaboration I've ever done, and I'd love to have done more with them, but you obviously never got the chance?
Well, I love collaborations. I love working with different people, and you know, between 1982 and 1999, the Wikipedia pages have been rewritten. The history of the band has been rewritten in places. But yeah, I joined in August 99. That's just the point where I was, I'd been doing 7 years of acting and did a couple of shows in the West End. A lot of it I was playing instruments, rock musicals and stuff. That's a whole area. There's a huge amount of my life that I've not talked about in detail. But anyway, that's by the by. Yeah, doing collaborations are brilliant. And during that period, obviously I wrote some operas and some pretty way out stuff. I did a postgrad at the Guildhall kind of experimental stuff. I mean, a load of it tends to end up as being kind of pretentious bullshit, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, because it's like you throw a lot of stuff up in the air, and sometimes you come up with something that is original and different, and you've got to experiment to come across those things. It's like, yeah, experimenting, playing. So, you know, I did country and western in pubs, and I don't listen to country. I never listen to country. I love singing it though. I'm a really good country singer. In fact, you know, I'm a bass player, of course, but I'm a much better singer than I am a bass player. And that's really how I identify as a singer, songwriter who also plays bass and performs. It's like a package. But the singing is core to it, really, and the writing. So yeah, I wrote some operas that were way out there, sung country music in pubs, and then, yeah, just loads of different styles of music. I did some dance music at one point, and yeah, it's great. And every person you work with is a new experience, and I wish we could have done more of that. So the obvious thing to zone in on is the Legacy album, because we had the most stunning guests. But from the point of view of a collaboration, what we did was we talked about it for a long time. Then we started doing the album, and we thought, yeah, let's get some people on board, which we did. And we were so honoured to have all these amazing people agreeing to playing on the album. And so on one level, it's collaborative because those very people did play on our tracks, but we recorded in the studio in Wales. Then, of course, the tracks get sent over to wherever they were. They put their part on and send them back. So it is a collaboration because you're working together on a track, but it's not quite the same as if you're working on a song together. You're writing a song together, or even developing the arrangement together in the same room, or in any way, shape or form.
Yeah.
It felt more like being honoured by these guests who were people that we admired and respected. It was a great honour, and it was a form of collaboration, but perhaps not exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and not you know, I had a chance to bounce ideas off them. It was more like you wrote something, they sung it, and that was sent back to you. Yeah.
So like obviously Lemmy wasn't particularly au fait with modern technology. That wasn't his thing.
Yeah.
But you know, we send the stuff over. A studio's hired in LA for 3 hours. Somebody takes in there, he puts his part down, and then they send it back to us. And so, and it's great. It's really exciting. It's one way of collaborating, a great way. But yeah, I mean, a lot of bands are as they are, but you know, you get people like, say, Slash doing an album and having loads of different guests on it, and so that's been happening a lot more in recent years. And you see it with dance music and pop music, entire albums that are just made of one person collaborating with a whole load of different other people. I find it really exciting. I like
it's easier now as well, isn't it, with this modern technology? Because years ago, you would have had, like you say, you would have had to be in the same room to do it. You would have had to fly miles and to meet up with them. But now it's just like you say, you're just sending tapes or MP3s over the internet, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I suppose. Yeah. You know, we worked with Ace from Skunk Anansie, for example. He remixed one of our tracks, and again, that was done remotely, but it was much more, you know, he did a mix and then came back, and we had notes, and then we sent it back, and then he made a few adjustments, and that was a bit more collaborative because of it was more than just sending it and then whatever came back. Phil Campbell, when he played on Legacy, he was astonishing. because he was, we had two people turn up at the studio. One was Neil Murray, and the other was Phil, because he just happened. Motorhead were touring 11 months or recording touring 11 months or whatever, and it just happened to be the month where he was in Wales, and so that was great. So he turns up and he just listens once, put storming solo down, and that was obviously because he was physically there. That was nice. So it's a shame that we couldn't have worked on a track from scratch, but of course, there's all our heroes we would have loved to have worked with. Probably Dave Grohl. I think he's somebody that we would have all voted for, and coming from he's hardly a spring chicken, but he obviously comes from a different generation and a completely new era in music.
Yeah, I mean, it more or less started, was it, late 80s, 90s, wasn't it? Whereas you'd been going a while by then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's different input. And he's also started off as a drummer, then he's a guitarist, then he's a singer. He's very, very multi-talented.
Yeah. But it's also, like he collaborated with Bowie. And, Bowie's, well, certainly Kim and myself, was our ultimate hero.
Yeah. I mean, if there was that's while you're talking about heroes, if there was a ultimate hero that you wanted to meet and never got the chance to, would that be Bowie? Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
And is that the sort of music you would play as well around the house? Is it, or do you stick with metal, or is it all sorts?
All sorts.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bowie is the ultimate, really. I mean, some of his stuff kind of goes into heavy-ish territory.
Yeah.
But he touched on so many different influences. The first album, and it was, well, I can remember it so well, because Kim had more albums than me because her family had more money. But I bought Aladdin Sane, or my mum bought it for me. We only had about 2 albums a year, or I did anyway. One for Christmas, one for birthday.
Yeah.
Music was special. At school, didn't have any money. So hearing Aladdin Sane, that was quite a heavy Bowie album, but it was very, very, very New York heavy. And that goes back to kind of Iggy Pop and the Stooges a little bit, and the New York Dolls, and those kind of bands influencing punk. But then there's a bit of a crossover with punk, rock, metal. The Damned toured with Ourselves and Motorhead, of course.
Yeah.
So, it starts to kind of, and I suppose the album, Earthling, that's pretty heavy. But he touched on so many different styles. And throughout my life, Kim has always been very, and Denise as well, just very, this is what rock and metal is. And whereas I sort of like to try and push the boundaries as far as possible, and sometimes you mess up maybe and just chuck it away, and sometimes you might, because it keeps it exciting for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's it's a question for all bands. It's like when, I think, say Judas Priest, for example, they're going along a particular route, and then they do an album that's a little bit dance orientated by metal standards. Some people love it, some people hate it. And then perhaps they go back a little bit more to what is familiar. AC/DC, of course, have a fundamental sound, and they haven't gone very far from that sound always. But the last album has been really well received. And if that sound is so great, why go too far away from it? I mean, we did, I think the best two albums Girlschool ever did are Demolition and Legacy.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And part of that is because we were totally 100% there. Hit and Run, of course, was the best-selling album.
Yeah.
But that was partly because it came straight after Please Don't Touch.
Yeah, on the back of that, yeah.
Yeah. And I sang half of Hit and Run, Kelly sang the other half. And it was, so that was part of it. Kim only had one track. So I think she wanted to, well, yeah. Then it became back to two singers after I wasn't there. It was quite hard to fit three lead singers in with three egos.
Yeah.
So the whole Demolition thing was quite punk influenced, and I mean, it's still a heavy album, but you can hear a little bit of punk there, and you can hear the Motorhead influence, of course. But yeah, it was a little experimental in places, and then it just became a little bit more a set sound, I felt, after that. And with Legacy, a lot of that album, the other three were very emotional about Kelly's death. But the thing was that although Kelly and I didn't like each other, and there were lots of reasons for it, but I was there when Kelly was dying, and I visited her several times in the hospital, and it didn't matter whether I liked her or not. It was a human being who was going through the most awful, unimaginable, slow death. And I did everything I could to be there. And a couple of the people that loved her very much hardly visited at all because they found it too painful to see her dying, which is a kind of irony in a way. So for a couple of years, there was a lot of emotion going around. And I had my particular approach of, I can honor and respect this person as a fellow human being. And that was 100% totally unequivocally the case. So a lot of the songs written, because it was three of us, during that period, I'm in the band for about 20 years, the songwriting was split roughly equally three ways. But Jackie would have liked it to have been split two ways, because when I was in the band originally, Kim and Kelly were a songwriting team.
Yeah. And
Kim and I both had this discussion one time about where we agreed where, in a symbolic way, it was a bit like I was the George Harrison of the band. That, you know, if you've got a Lennon-McCartney team and they agree that's how it's going to be, yeah, then somebody comes along, they might be able to write a good song sometimes, but that, you know, the Jagger Richards is already there. People know which side their bread's buttered. Okay, I'll support your song, you support mine. We're a team of two people, and then it's very difficult for anyone else to get in. So there were some massive arguments with Jackie and myself about who gets their song on. But with Legacy, I had to give some of my royalties to Denise to get my own songs on the album. It's absurd. But nevertheless, we were all very passionate. We were all coming from different directions with how we wanted to express it, but we were all very passionate about certain things that we wanted to write about. And so there was a lot of emotion and passion coming from all different directions in that album. And we also, I'm not saying it's musically that radical, but for Girlschool, we managed to keep a sound and an approach and an album that was Girlschool, that is Girlschool, that stretched the boundaries way beyond what I think a lot of the previous albums had done, which sometimes could be a bit formulaic. If you're Kim likes rock and roll, 3 chords, and to some extent that's how Lemmy liked to approach things to a certain extent. But there are Motorhead albums that went into territory that, they're not all the same.
No.
And some people like to see that. If you can keep that, there's some kind of, I don't know what some sort of root sound that you always know it's that band, that they're always being true to themselves. They're not trying to change to follow fashion, but at the same time, not constantly repeating the same thing over and over, because that's what people want to hear. That's who we are.
Yeah.
And I think we got the balance right.
Yeah.
So I'm really proud of that album, and of Demolition.
Yeah. I mean, I love Legacy and love Demolition as well. But I think, like you say, hit the nail on the head. You've got to progress and you've got to evolve in some way to keep your longevity. And I think, to a certain extent, I think Girlschool have done it. But like you say, they do sometimes get a bit blinkered in some of the stuff. And I think a lot of bands do. They like to stay safe because they know that's what the fans like.
It's always been very much Kim and Denise, a bit, but there is a kind of keeping that rock music came from the 3 chord, the 50s sort of 3 chord early spirit that came back again with punk. If you listen to the Sex Pistols, Submission, you can hear the early Motorhead just bringing sound together. You can hear, you've got the Louie Louie and you've got the 50s stuff that Lemmy loved, and the Pirates, and that really early, that was, Kim and I didn't grow up with that. That was, he was a few years older. So you've got that original spirit of rock and roll, and that simplicity has a certain edge to it, and it's brilliant. But you've got to keep pushing the boundaries, and then just getting that balance right. And funnily enough, in spite of the fact that Kelly and I just, for so many reasons, never quite hit it off. There was always this rivalry, I suppose, of a type, but a very undermining kind of rivalry, as opposed to, you can do it in a way that's where you want to write something better than the other person, and that makes you work harder to up your game. Sometimes it can be something very positive, but you've got to stay in that positive sort of space when you do it. And with Legacy, I think we got that space right.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, you've got to be in the right headspace, because if you're arguing all the time, you're not going to get decent music out of it. Simple as that, are you?
No, you're not. But going back to the stuff with even with gardening and growing, and seeing the star behind you and stuff, it's like, broadly speaking, I call myself a pagan.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit like a Christian that doesn't go to church but lives like a Christian, as opposed to the type that go to church on Sunday and then complete bastards to everybody the rest of the well, I won't start ranting about Catholic priests, but
No, I know what you mean. But when we got married, me and my wife, the priest, because my wife's not religious in any way, shape, or form. She's more like you. She's more spiritual and this, that, and the other. And she went to church, and the vicar said to her, "You're more spiritual than any of these people that come to my church on a Sunday." And like you say, for the same reasons you said, they're all up their own arses in the week, and then they come in and oh yeah, every Sunday, and that's it. But every other time of the day, they're just nasty and horrible to people.
Well, it's like the sort of David Camerons or what, I don't know how often he goes to church, but some Tories who will go to church and then are quite happy to see children starving. And I'm, well, these subjects are complicated, but the basic principles of paganism are a love of and respect for nature, which a lot of people have been getting really attuned to nature through COVID. And that's just something I'm a typical Taurian in that way. I love nature. And it's so the outdoors is the church. And
Yeah.
of course, I'm half Welsh, and you'd have like groves of trees, and that would be like an outdoor church. Nature is living God, whatever. And the second is the principle of the goddess. So the spiritual is a female force, or a male female force, not just a man with a beard. No offense. I'm sure you're lovely, but I'm not going to worship you as God. And then in fact, I don't worship beards. Well, I'm not going to. I've got a sense of humour like a teenage boy, and I have to really bite my lip because it sounds so undignified. But I've got a terrible sense of humour. I could be really crude sometimes, so I'll spare you that. And the third principle is do what thou wilt, but harm none. And of course, Aleister Crowley said, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Well, no, sleeping with little babies, no, you will not do that without. But that basic principle of it runs through every major religion. And then, of course, there are different groups within it. But from the point of view of growing food, cooking it, and that being something meaningful and symbolic, because when we eat food through a chemical process, it becomes us.
Yeah.
It is quite a sacred, holistic experience to eat food. And so we shouldn't eat shit, because we'll become shit. There is an element of truth in that. And the principle I've always been very feminist. And so the principle of a female deity or a male female deity being shared. The world is made up of men and women. I adore men. I love men. But I want to see a world where women have equal, and people of colour and people with disabilities, etc., having equal opportunities and being paid the same for them. And if men want to go in the kitchen and wear a dress, that's fine too. It's like, it doesn't matter, as long as there's a certain amount of respect. And yes, I can see certain people laughing. I have a mouth on me sometimes if I think someone's being an arsehole. I've quite a sharp tongue.
Nothing wrong with
it. Well, I think some people should be sliced to threads with my tongue, but I have to keep a diplomatic silence occasionally. So, yeah, it's about living authentically. And may I ask what your sun sign is, please?
To be honest, I don't know. My star sign.
Yeah, it's the same thing, because the sun is the star as opposed to a planet.
Well, I'm Pisces.
Oh, okay. Am I allowed to say, you can press the pause, can I ask what year?
65.
Oh, okay, thank you.
It's all right. And my wife's a Taurus.
Oh, well, okay. All right, I'll talk very simplistically here, but there was Kim's a Taurian as well, and I am. And I remember picking up an astrology book very early on, and it went Taurus, food, sex, food, sex, food, sex. And like Taurus is a sign that often likes gardening, often likes singing, just very earthy, sometimes can be very materialistic, but a very, very, it's an earth sign and often has an affinity with planet Earth, a very physical sign. So whether it's we can buy physical things with money, or whether it's sex, or whether it's gardening, or using our body as an instrument, which is what you do when you're singing, it's it's a very grounded physical sign in many ways, and often loves physical pleasures, hence food, sex, food, sex. But Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, and in many ways Pisces are the most complex because they contain within them a little bit of all the 12 signs. And Pisces is, of course, a water sign, the sign that is most attuned to the spirit world. And so for every Piscean, there is a need to, on some level, escape beyond the material world. And we can do that in many ways. We can do it through drink and drugs, which within a certain context might be, but as a lifestyle, maybe not the best idea. We can do it through doing things for other people, through charity, through healing, through anything where we take outside of our own ego and put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. And Pisces rules the feet, so I said shoes deliberately. And then also music and art and theatre and dance. All of these things have a strong correlation with Pisces because it takes us out of our day-to-day lives where we're paying the bills, or we're, you know, cleaning the sink, or we're the mundane world of living on planet Earth, to something, we're spiritual beings as well as physical beings, something that takes us beyond the day-to-day, that give our lives meaning. So Pisces is a sign that is very attuned to that. But also people born in the mid-60s are, there are certain planets that came together in the 30s, in the mid-60s, and a few years ago. And in the 30s, you had, of course, fascism and propaganda. We've been seeing that again, particularly in America. Sorry if there's any Trump followers, but he's clearly one of the most mendacious people ever existed. And then in the 60s, you had a lot of revolution. You had Black rights, you had sexual liberation, and then women's rights that started to really get going in the 70s. But a load of disruption. You had people being killed by the police, a whole youth movement. The 60s were gargantuan. And so in 1965, I think that was the year that Bob Dylan plugged his electric guitar in for the first time. It was a time of revolution and chaos and massive, massive transformational change. You had sort of around the time of Rubber Soul, it was 65, 66. So people born at that time have very often had massive changes and revolution in their life, whether it's been a kind of unstable childhood, or like Kurt Cobain, for example. He's a classic example of somebody who was born in the mid-60s. But that kind of revolutionary principle, often rebels, and you have something of the time that you were born in who you are.
Yeah. And
so I can go into it a lot deeper than that, but it's
some of the time,
certainly
definitely.
it's certainly, yeah. People born in the mid-60s are radical in some way. They're very much rebels of one description or another. But yeah, I could just talk for hours. I'll stay there.
Fine. I suppose we better ought to wrap the interview up now. So people are probably going to know, you know, you can't, like, so we've skirted on it a little bit about your future and what have you, but we're definitely going to get Enid carrying on musically at some shape.
In some way, shape or form, yeah. You know, it's just, I can start singing now if you like. No. But it's just, it's just.
I think
I just burst into song. I've just always sung ever since. I can't help it. Yeah. So I might as well press play, mightn't I?
Yeah.
Or record when I do. So I just haven't felt like being public in some ways.
Yeah.
And at the moment. But yeah, I'm still kind of playing around with things, and so I seem to have zillions of Facebook pages because I kept them all separate, and it's just way too much. But I do have.
I've got loads.
Well, it's kind of. I tend to keep my friends page smallish because otherwise I can't keep in touch with the people that I'm really close to, and so I tend to do stuff under Girlschool Enid quite a bit because that's pretty clear. It's like I am who I am, and that's, you know, the band that I came from and started. So that tends to be more towards, if I'm talking about music, it will tend to be under that. And I've done a bit of stuff. I've got Twitter pages as well. I've got 4 Twitter pages that I run, and I'm not on there all the time, but you know, I talk about my gardening and my food under my own name, and then I talk about music stuff usually under Girlschool Enid, and then I've got Rock Astrology, which I'm going to be doing more of this, talking about the astrology of musicians.
Yeah.
So I've got a page on it's a very out-of-date website, I have to confess, but I've got an astrology page where I do Lemmy and Dio and so on. And I want to do more of that, talking about the astrology of different musicians. And I'm going to be running some sessions, because, you know, you can read your sun sign astrology in the newspaper, and it is real. It's not just made up, but obviously you have to be quite general with, when you're talking about 1/12 of the population, it has to be general by nature, but you can talk about it much deeper when there's so much more to learn. And not everyone wants to go and do a 3-year course and practice as an astrologer. So I want to talk a little bit about what's been going on this year and what's going to be going on next year, because astrology is a really helpful tool. It's a bit like weather forecasting. You can't change the weather, but if you know, okay, the sun is shining, I'm going out for the day. Oh, it's going to rain later. I'd never have expected that. So you put an umbrella in your bag. You know, it's a bit like that. It just gives you a little bit of, it gives you a broader perspective, and it gives some useful information. So I'm going to be running some sessions where I just talk a bit about astrology, and people can ask me questions, and learning the basics if you want to look at your own chart or whatever, etc. So and I run Hastings Astrology Group, which I had to put on ice for a bit. So although, because I'm based in Hastings now, and that's where I'm going to do a few workshops and stuff, and then I'm going to do a few articles, media stuff with Rock Astrology. Yeah.
So if they Google you, they can get all the links to all that stuff and all the other pages, and etc. Yeah.
I don't know what's going to. I don't know what will come up. God forbid. Probably some. Since certain people in certain bands work in IT, I should think probably what comes up is quite different to what. Well, as I say, you know, it's of course people search for my name, generally speaking, but under my own name, I want to do my gardening and cooking, and so on.
Send me some links over, and I'll put them at the end of this video, and then people can see these sort of things rather than stuff that might not be true. How's that get you?
Well, yeah, it's we live in a time where it's like there's lots of truths, but I kind of go, nah. Sometimes there are different perspectives, and sometimes we have to look at things from other people's point of view. But yeah, there's generally truth, and there's what is the word I'm looking for? It's so tempting to say things about Trump, really, and Johnson for that matter. But I'm sorry if I'm offending people there, but I think even if you're a fan of those particular people, it's very hard not to say that some people are very good at making up loads of stories, and I just find it really extraordinary when people, well, people like to live with fairy tales sometimes.
Well, we all like a good fairy tale, don't we?
Well, my favourite fairy tale, I feel it's been hijacked. I always liked The Emperor's New Clothes. That was my favourite, not quite a fairy tale. I was obsessed with that story, so I was really annoyed when Russell Brand hijacked that. And it's, yeah, that's my favourite story.
It's quite apt at the moment, though, with everything that's going on. The Emperor's New Clothes.
It is, and it has been for quite a few. Years.
Yeah.
For about a decade now, it's been particularly. It's been outrageous, frankly.
It has.
I best leave it there.
Yeah, we'll leave it there.
Sometimes outrageous is good.
Yeah. Well, thanks for talking to me anyway. Finally hooked up. I'm glad about that.
Talking at you. I'm so sorry, Mick.
No, it's fine.